Walz made himself fair game, since his only attack was that the other guy was weird. Because everyone is weird, the more you get to know them. It's why marriage is a commitment. Over time, both spouses realize we're all bat crazy. But there's weird and there's dangerously insane. And that's thinking children can decide to have themselves castrated. And that's Tim Walz. Poor Kamala Harris has created her own scented candle. And just like her, it gets lit every night. She's a drunk.
Greg Gutfeld just unleashed a brutal, side-splitting takedown of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz that scorched every inch of their political credibility. With sarcasm sharper than a scalpel and wit faster than a fact-check, Gutfeld dismantled Kamala's word salads and Walz's lightweight leadership style like a demolition crew on espresso. From Kamala's nervous giggles to Walz's never-ending task forces, nothing was spared. If political nonsense had a face, Gutfeld just slapped both of them with reality in a punchline.
CBS's 60 Minutes was caught editing their interview with Kamala Harris to make her look better. It's a shocking ethical lapse. Mike Wallace must be rolling in his grave. Not over this, though, but that his son is Chris Wallace.
I think it's very important, as you have heard from so many incredible leaders, for us at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist and are present, and to be able to contextualize it, to understand where we exist in the history and in the moment as it relates not only to the past, but the future.
You know, that's some bad weed. Generally, when people get high, they actually have some interesting thoughts. Not her.
Greg Gutfeld didn't just step onto the set that night. He launched into it like a caffeine-fueled satirist on a mission from the comedy gods. Armed with nothing but biting sarcasm and a grin that screamed, "This is going to hurt," he set his sights on the dynamic duo of disaster, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It wasn't a roast, it was a 2-for-1 demolition. And by the time he was done, the political landscape had more potholes than a Minnesota
If Kamala remained a constant, then what impacted the polls? And it's driven by identity politics.
We're going to cook today.
Okay.
Is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you are Indian.
Yeah.
And you all helped us win in 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024.
What would Trump have to say about Kamala's qualifications?
Well, you know, she's flip-flopping, Greg. I mean, these are flip-flops. And Indian people and blacks wear flip-flops, which is good. But
It started with Kamala, the vice president with the resume of a career bureaucrat and the communication skills of a malfunctioning GPS. Gutfeld leaned into the bizarre rhythm of her public speeches. The stilted sentences that zigzag like someone trying to freestyle after swallowing a thesaurus. According to him, every time she opens her mouth, you're not sure if you're listening to policy or poetry written during a power outage.
One of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
sorry.
He compared her delivery to someone who just learned what a metaphor is and now insists on using it like seasoning, dumping it on everything whether it fits or not. And let's talk substance. Gutfeld shredded Kamala's ability to address an issue with all the depth of a puddle in Phoenix. He joked that asking her to explain inflation was like asking a cat to do your taxes. Plenty of noise, no results. She tiptoes around problems like they're landmines made of fragile glass, tossing in a nervous laugh and a word salad, so tossed it needs dressing.
With Walz, it's hard to even bring him up. He has a resting snitch face. You know? I mean, he forfeited his man card during COVID and the riots. And you're right. And also, at that diner, of course, he left early. So don't you find it weird that for a terrifying threat to democracy that Trump is, not a single interviewer in the history in his history has approached him with trepidation.
You'd ask for clarity, but what you'd get is a TED Talk by someone who clearly missed the rehearsal. He pointed out her infamous track record of dodging tough questions. Watching her in interviews, Gutfeld said, is like watching someone play dodgeball with reality. The moment facts come flying, she's ducking behind phrases like, "Let's be clear," only to never be clear again. He likened it to tuning into a cooking show and watching the host explain how to make lasagna using only cloud metaphors and nervous laughter. Insight? Nope. Just an interpretive dance of confusion. Then he pivoted to the border crisis, a favorite Kamala project that she seems to treat like a gym membership. It's technically on her list, but you never really see her there. Gutfeld roasted her for treating the border like a magical fairy tale. If you ignore it long enough, maybe it'll fix itself. He said she's more likely to visit Mars than McAllen. And when she does speak on immigration, it's with the urgency of someone giving a weather.
I want to see this in slow motion. You'll see Walz extends his hand to his wife. She grabs it, they shake, he pulls her close, and then goes in for that non-friction hug, all the while still shaking her hand. I wish there was a word to describe that. Oh yeah, weird.
Oh yeah, weird. Just when the studio audience thought it couldn't get sharper, Gutfeld turned to Tim Walz. If Kamala was the queen of confusion, Walz was her court jester of indecision. Gutfeld painted Walz as the kind of leader who walks into a crisis with a clipboard and walks out with a shrug. Minnesota, under his watch, became a case study in how to turn a once proud state into a bureaucratic carnival. He torched Walz's lockdown policies like a man who had personally suffered through every Zoom call, mask mandate, and government-issued contradiction. Gutfeld called him the captain of the SS. Maybe, drifting between guidelines and restrictions like a confused DJ spinning records no one asked for. One day, gyms are closed. The next day, you can wrestle in them as long as you're wearing oven mitts. It was health policy written by a committee of squirrels on Red Bull. And then came the crime wave. Gutfeld accused Walz of treating the spike in crime like a rumor he hoped would just go away. Minnesota's major cities turned into hotbeds of unrest and violence. And Walz's solution? Hold more meetings, issue more press releases, and occasionally look mildly
As a teacher, my number one responsibility in the classroom is the safety, security, and belongingness of every single child in that room. These are children my son's age, a 4th grader, a 10-year-old, who just wants to go to the bathroom, and their identity is they are male or female, and they just go in that bathroom and use it, end quote. Sounds so folksy, you know? Belongingness. Yeah, they'll be belonging in therapy with this guy at the helm.
Gutfeld described him as a man who read a leadership manual backward, starting with blame everyone else and skipping over take action. The kicker? Gutfeld said watching Walz speak to the media was like watching a substitute teacher try to explain nuclear physics to a kindergarten class. Awkward, unnecessary, and completely lost. The tone, the cadence, the complete absence of conviction. Gutfeld mocked him for having the charisma of a soggy mop and the vision of a bat in daylight. He didn't lead, he lingered. He didn't decide, he delayed. And when things blew up, he acted like someone else had hidden the fuse. But Gutfeld wasn't finished, oh no. He returned to Kamala with the precision of a roast master on a mission. He dug into her time as California's Attorney General, claiming her reform policies were less about justice and more about collecting headlines. He suggested her memory of her past positions shifts depending on who's in the room. She's the political equivalent of a chameleon with Wi-Fi, constantly updating.
A question of what can be unburdened by what has been.
We see what can be unburdened by what has been.
To see what can be unburdened by what has been.
Believing in what can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be
unburdened by what has been.
What can be, unburdened by what has been.
Having faith in what can be, unburdened by what has been.
See what can be, unburdened by what has been.
To see what can be, unburdened by what has been.
You know, if Kamala gets dementia, it would be an improvement.
He brought up her awkward public appearances, where she bursts into laughter at the most inappropriate times, like she's buffering in real life. According to Gutfeld, Kamala's nervous giggles could power a small wind farm, and they usually arrive at the exact moment she realizes she doesn't have an answer. He said, asking Kamala a yes or no question is like setting off a Rube Goldberg machine. What follows is complicated, noisy, and completely unrelated to the task at hand. Then back to Walz because there's just so much material. Gutfeld couldn't resist roasting the Minnesota governor for his love of task forces and panels. Every issue, from policing to potholes, seemed to require another study, another committee, another taxpayer-funded exercise in procrastination. According to Gutfeld, Walz handles problems the same way people handle laundry. Keep adding to the pile and hope someone else deals with it eventually. He mocked Walz's educational priorities, too, pointing out how academic scores were slipping while the state poured millions into programs that sounded like rejected TED Talks. Walz, Gutfeld said, seemed more interested in slogans than solutions, offering flowery language while schools crumbled under bureaucracy. Education under Walz, Gutfeld claimed, looked more like a political science experiment gone horribly wrong. Kids weren't learning to read, they were learning to memorize buzzwords. As the roast continued, Gutfeld started pairing their flaws like a sommelier of dysfunction, Kamala's incoherence and Walz's indecision, two sides of the...
What is with this administration and the spouse swapping of the VP and the president? We saw it before. Like, Dr. Jill didn't kiss Joe like that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And now he couldn't wait to get that full embrace. It wasn't a bro hug, it was a yo hug. And he put his wife in the friend zone.
Yes.
Which is always, that must have been a fun car ride home.
Yeah.
Why can't you hug me like her husband? I mean, it's weird.
It is weird. You know, Joey, I think that it's okay to take Walz's picadillos, if you call it, apart, because remember, he broke the seal by calling Vance weird, and we're all weird, including him.
Yeah, we're very weird. I'm weird.
What is it with this administration and the spouse-swapping energy between the VP and the president? We saw it before, like Dr. Jill didn't kiss Joe like that. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And now he couldn't wait to get that full embrace. It wasn't a bro hug, it was a yo hug. And, he put his wife in the friend zone. Yes, which is always. That must have been a fun car ride home. Why can't you hug me like her husband? I mean, it's weird. It is weird. You know, Joey, I think it's okay to take Walz's picadillos, if you can call them that, apart. Because remember, he broke the seal by calling Vance weird. And we're all weird. Including him. Yeah, we're very weird. I'm weird. One delivers empty speeches like she's reading from a scrambled teleprompter. The other governs like he's flipping a coin he lost halfway through the toss. Together, they're the political equivalent of a slow Wi-Fi signal, always buffering, never loading. He wrapped his tirade around the absurdity of their combined influence, Kamala as vice president, occasionally emerging from her echo chamber to deliver half-baked inspiration, and Walz as governor, managing his state like a man who still thinks leadership is something you microwave. Gutfeld imagined the two of them in a room together trying to solve a crisis. Kamala delivers a word salad so complex even AI would short-circuit, while Walz nods, starts a task force, and exits through the gift shop. Even their public personas took a hit. Gutfeld laughed at Kamala's carefully crafted media image, built like a fragile Jenga tower of curated interviews, friendly headlines, and canned empathy. He contrasted it with Walz's bland, beige
Kamala Harris is the Democrat candidate for president of the United States. I'll give you a second to come to. The border czar who couldn't find our southern border on a map of Texas now wants to be America's commander-in-chief. Kamala couldn't lead a campfire sing-along, let alone the country's armed forces. But does that matter? not to the media. Now, they would like this framed as a team sport battle, left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. But in reality, it's the media narrative machine versus reality.
He likened Kamala to an automated voicemail, friendly, vague, and useless in an emergency, and said Walz manages crises with the urgency of a sloth on sedatives. He didn't need to yell or exaggerate. The facts were absurd enough. Kamala's baffling soundbites, Walz's policy ping-pong, the rising crime, the economic confusion, the educational decline, the empty speeches, the photo ops, the press conferences designed to say nothing. Gutfeld simply held a mirror up to their records, and the reflection was comedic gold. By the time he was done, Kamala's platitudes and Walz's non-decisions were no longer protected by spin. They were laid bare, stripped of polish, and delivered to the audience on a silver platter of sarcasm. Gutfeld didn't just roast them, he deconstructed them, exposing the hollow center where substance should have lived. And yet, he left it open. Because as long as Kamala keeps speaking in riddles, and Walz keeps governing like a man reading instructions written in invisible ink, there will always be more material. Always another press conference to mock, another headline to dissect, another policy to laugh through the pain. The circus hasn't left town.
VP made her first major speech last night since Trump took office, and it was another classic ball of verbal vomit. Here she is referencing a viral video of elephants. Watch.
Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago? The one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake?
Gutfeld circled back like a sniper with a punchline, locking in again on Kamala's tendency to show up late to every political moment and leave even later without saying anything memorable. He joked that if she ever got a Netflix special, it'd be titled Delayed Arrival, starring zero substance. He pointed out how every appearance feels like a dress rehearsal for a performance that never actually happens. She walks on stage with the confidence of a keynote speaker, delivers a maze of metaphors, sprinkles in a few awkward laughs, then vanishes into thin air, like a magician with commitment issues. Meanwhile, he said Tim Walz was out here turning Minnesota into a real-life tutorial on how to run a state into the ground without ever breaking a sweat. Gutfeld mocked how Walz treats governance like he's constantly playing defense in a game no one else is watching. He joked that Walz wakes up every day and checks what California did wrong, just to make sure Minnesota's doing it slightly worse. It's not leadership. It's imitation mixed with hesitation and sold as progress.
I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DEI, and we let them define what woke is.
Then came the haymaker. Gutfeld pointed out that both Kamala and Walz represent what happens when style overtakes substance. They're the political version of wrapping an empty box in shiny gift paper. He called Kamala's laugh a national mystery, and Walz's plan for the future an urban legend. He said, if Walz ever announced a bold new initiative, you'd need a translator, a decoder ring.